slum. But the region my hansom was now penetrating was one unending slum. The streets were filled with a new and different race of people, short of stature and of wretched or beer-sodden appearance. We rolled along through miles of bricks and squalor, and from each cross street and alley flashed long vistas of bricks and misery. Here and there lurched a drunken man or woman, and the air was obscene with sounds of jangling and squabbling. At a market, tottery old men and women were searching in the garbage thrown in the mud for rotten potatoes, beans, and vegetables, while little children clustered like flies around a festering mass of fruit, thrusting their arms to the shoulders into the liquid corruption, and drawing forth morsels but partially decayed, which they devoured on the spot. Not a hansom did I meet with in all my drive, while mine was like an apparition from another and better world, the way the children ran after it and alongside. And as far as I could see were the solid walls of brick, the slimy pavements, and the screaming streets. And for the first time in my life the fear of the crowd smote me. It was like the fear of the sea, and the miserable multitudes, street upon street, seemed so many waves of a vast and malodorous sea, lapping about me and threatening to well up and over me. "Stepney, sir. Stepney Station," the cabby called down. I looked about. It was really a railroad station, and he had driven desperately to it as the one familiar spot he had ever heard of in all that wilderness. "Well," I said. He spluttered unintelligibly, shook his head, and looked very miserable. "I'm a stranger here," he managed to articulate, "and if you don't want Stepney Station, I'm blessed if I know what you do want." "I'll tell you what I want," I said. "You drive along and keep your eye out for a shop where old clothes are sold. Now, when you see such a shop, drive right on till you turn the corner, then stop and let me out." I could see that he was growing dubious of his fare, but not long afterwards he pulled up to the curb and informed me that an old clothes shop was to be found a bit of the way back. "Won't you pay me?" he pleaded. "There's 7 and 6 owing me." "Yes," I laughed, "and it would be the last I'd see of you." "Lord lumme, but it'll be the last I see of you if you don't pay me," he retorted. But a crowd of ragged onlookers had already gathered around the cab, and I laughed again and walked back to the old clothes shop. Here the chief difficulty was in making the shopman understand that I really and truly wanted old clothes. But after fruitless attempts to press upon me new and impossible coats and trousers, he began to bring to light heaps of old ones, looking mysterious the while, and hinting darkly. This he did with the palpable intention of letting me know that he had piped my lay, in order to bulldoze me, through fear of exposure, into paying heavily for my purchases. A man in trouble, or a high-class criminal from across the water, was what he took my measure for. In either case, a person anxious to avoid the police. But I disputed with him over the outrageous difference between prices and values, till I quite disabused him of the notion, and he settled down to drive a hard bargain with a hard customer. In the end, I selected a pair of stout though well-worn trousers, a frayed jacket with one remaining button, a pair of brogans, which had plainly seen service where coal was shovelled, a thin leather belt, and a very dirty cloth cap. My underclothing and socks, however, were new and warm, but of the sort that any American waif down in his luck could acquire in the ordinary course of events. "I must say you're a sharp 'un," he said with counterfeit admiration, as I handed over the 10 shillings finally agreed upon for the outfit. "Blimey, if you ain't been up and down Petticoat Lane afore now. Your trousies is worth 5 bob to any man, and a docker 'ud give 2 and 6 for the shoes, to say nothing of the coat and cap and new stoker's singlet and other things." "How much will you give me for them?" I demanded suddenly. "I paid you 10 bob for the lot, and I'll sell them back to you right now for 8. Come, it's a go." But he grinned and shook his head, and though I had made a good bargain, I was unpleasantly aware that he had made a better one. I found the cabby and a policeman with their heads together, but the latter, after looking me over sharply, and particularly scrutinising the bundle under my arm, turned away and left the cabby to wax mutinous by himself. And not a step would he budge till I paid him the 7 shillings and 6pence owing him, whereupon he was willing to drive me to the ends of the earth, apologising profusely for his insistence, and explaining that one ran across queer customers in London town. But he drove me only to Highbury Vale in North London, where my luggage was waiting for me. Here, next day, I took off my shoes, not without regret for their lightness and comfort, and my soft grey travelling suit, and in fact all my clothing, and proceeded to array myself in the clothes of the other and unimaginable men who must have been indeed unfortunate to have had to part with such rags for the pitiable sums obtainable from a dealer. Inside my stoker's singlet, in the armpit, I sewed a gold sovereign, an emergency sum certainly of modest proportions, and inside my stoker's singlet I put myself. And then I sat down and moralised upon the fair years and fat which had made my skin soft and brought the nerves close to the surface, for the singlet was rough and raspy as a hair shirt, and I am confident that the most rigorous of ascetics suffer no more than I did in the ensuing 24 hours. The remainder of my costume was fairly easy to put on, though the brogans, or brogues, were quite a problem. As stiff and hard as if made of wood, it was only after a prolonged pounding of the uppers with my fists that I was able to get my feet into them at all. Then, with a few shillings, a knife, a handkerchief, and some brown papers and flake tobacco stowed away in my pockets, I thumped down the stairs and said good-bye to my foreboding friends. As I paused out of the door, the help, a comely middle-aged woman, could not conquer a grin that twisted her lips and separated them till the throat, out of involuntary sympathy, made the uncouth animal noises we are wont to designate as laughter. No sooner was I out on the streets than I was impressed by the difference in status effected by my clothes. All servility vanished from the demeanour of the common people with whom I came in contact. Presto! In the twinkling of an eye, so to say, I had become one of them. My frayed and out-at-elbows jacket was the badge and advertisement of my class, which was their class. It made me of like kind, and in place of the fawning and too respectful attention I had hitherto received, I now shared with them a comradeship. The man in corduroy and dirty neckerchief no longer addressed me as "sir" or "governor." It was "mate" now, and a fine and hearty word, with a tingle to it and a warmth and gladness which the other term does not possess. "Governor"! It smacks of mastery and power and high authority, the tribute of the man who is under to the man on top, delivered in the hope that he will let up a bit and ease his weight, which is another way of saying that it is an appeal for alms. This brings me to a delight I experienced in my rags and tatters, which is denied the average American abroad. The European traveller from the States, who is not a Croesus, speedily finds himself reduced to a chronic state of self-conscious sordidness by the hordes of cringing robbers who clutter his steps from dawn till dark, and deplete his pocket-book in a way that puts compound interest to the blush. In my rags and tatters I escaped the pestilence of tipping, and encountered men on a basis of equality. Nay, before the day was out, I turned the tables, and said most gratefully, "Thank you, sir," to a gentleman whose horse I held, and who dropped a penny into my eager palm. Other changes I discovered were wrought in my condition by my new garb. In crossing crowded thoroughfares I found I had to be, if anything, more lively in avoiding vehicles, and it was strikingly impressed upon me that my life had cheapened in direct ratio with my clothes. When before I inquired the way of a policeman, I was usually asked, "Bus or 'ansom, sir?" But now the query became, "Walk or ride?" Also, at the railway stations, a third-class ticket was now shoved out to me as a matter of course. But there was compensation for it all. For the first time I met the English lower classes face to face, and knew them for what they were. When loungers and workmen at street corners and in public houses talked with me, they talked as one man to another, and they talked as natural men should talk, without the least idea of getting anything out of me for what they talked or the way they talked. And when at last I made into the East End, I was gratified to find that the fear of the crowd no longer haunted me. I had become a part of it. The vast and malodorous sea had welled up and over me, or I had slipped gently into it, and there was nothing fearsome about it. with the one exception of the stoker's singlet.